Hello everyone, this is Nick. How's everyone going? We had a bit of interesting news today in the world of X-Wing. On FFG's website, we had a nice article detailing a lot of the metadata from the recent Toronto System Open, as well as the hyperspace trial that was played at the same time. And at the bottom of this article, FFG made a short announcement. They are going to be doing an emergency points change of 2 cards. Lieutenant Dormant on the Upsilon class shuttle is going up by 10 points from 60 to 70 points. Hyperspace tracking data is going up from 2 points to 10 points. And I will be commenting on this in a second, but before I do, I'm actually just going to read verbatim from this article what FFG wrote. I do want to do this. I don't usually read from the articles directly, but the tone and some of the information they're hinting at is quite important here. It's likely that even by the end of March, we'll still be following the repercussions of the January points cost update, and that's an exciting thing for competitive X-Wing. Just as the results of Toronto have shown, the X-Wing Squad Builder app is proving to be an instrument of change and balance that it was meant to be, as we stated in our initial look at the Organised Play program for X-Wing 2nd Edition, and we're going to see even more changes. Effective immediately, Lieutenant Dormant has had his squad points increase up to 70 points, and hyperspace tracking data has been increased from 2 points to 10. The changes will impact both the System Open at Eindhoven and Adepticon, as well as the hyperspace trials that begin shortly. While these ships and upgrades don't blast into the top 8 at Toronto, they have been effective at previous events, and in a way de-emphasise the game's core focus on careful manoeuvring. Now this point's very important. The Triple Upsilon class list has provided a negative play experience for new players, and Toronto has already proven that the First Order has other viable options for top-level squadrons, another very important point. This points update cost will not impact the scheduled update for July, and X-Wing players should expect relatively few of these intermittent updates as we remain focused on the 2 yearly updates in January and July. So the key thing going on here is they decided that a key list that's being flown around in several tournaments, not necessarily taking a lot of tournaments, has proven problematic because of negative play experience. And I think that's a key thing to remember, guys. A lot of people tend to sort of default to this position that, well, it's not taking major tournaments, it's not winning nationals or hyperspace trials or systems opens or whatever. Therefore, it's not problematic, which is something I just don't agree with. The fact of the matter is, something can be problematic even if it's not having great finishes. But I do want to talk generally about this because the specific points changes here, I don't really have a very strong opinion on. Indeed, I've seen in the wake of this a lot of people saying, oh, it's a fantastic thing, you know, definitely got to get rid of triple upsilons, or it's a terrible knee-jerk reaction. People have to stop whining and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to talk about comments like that. Frankly, I think that's a bit reductionist and not really helpful to the conversation. But the fact of the matter is we had to have this points change in the first place. And I think that's the key thing going on here. Whether or not you agree behind the validity of it, the fact of the matter is we just had a points change, what's the 2nd of March now. So just over a month ago, we had that points change, well, like a month and a week ago. And I think this is symptomatic of something that I've actually been wanting to talk about for quite a while. And that's the fact that I think X-Wing 2nd Edition is in a very good place. I think the way we are changing points, the way that is scheduled, is all a fantastic thing. What I have a slight issue with, and in my own criticism, I always want to try and offer solutions. What I have an issue with the current system is the frequency of the points changes, and that is once every 6 months. The problem here is we had a major points change, and there was something that was at the very least deemed to be problematic directly after that points change. And when that happens, we have 6 months to wait until FFG can address that, unless they have an emergency points change, like we've seen here. Now, ideally, we don't want to have emergency points change. We want everything to be scheduled because it means it's better for us as a play group because we're able to plan things a lot better. FFG have greater control over problematic things within the meta. If they're doing emergency things, it may mean they don't have the kind of rigorous playtesting which they can schedule every 6 months. It means they have to do these kind of points changes that they are just throwing out into the wild and basically shotgunning one particular list. And while I think that is sometimes necessary, I don't think it's something that we want to see all too often. My personal opinion of this is 6 months is simply too infrequent. In fact, I would go as far as to say as FFG should look at a model of doing this once to every 3 or 4 months, either 4 or 3 times a year. And I think the obvious reaction to something like that would be, well, hang on, Nick, if that happens, then we're going to have things changing all the time. It's going to be too confusing, too hard to follow. And to that response, I would actually say, no, we wouldn't really have any more changes. We would just have them more spread out. What we're currently seeing is a points change that essentially contains all the changes they would do in a 6-month period all at once. Now, whether they have 2 points change or 1 points change over a 6-month period doesn't really change how many things they're likely to change. And more to the point, I think the biggest problem with a points change once every 6 months is FFG are less likely to be conservative and are probably more likely to opt to the more shotgun style changes. And there are a few things in this previous point change which I can point to and say, maybe that was a bit harsh, maybe that was a bit heavy-handed. Look, it's hard for me to say. I'm not a playtester. It's hard for all you guys to say. I see a lot of comments from you guys, Facebook, Twitter, here on YouTube, basically making these grandiose statements, or, well, they should not have changed this, or they went too far with that. When realistically, guys, we have to appreciate the meta as a whole. We know that FFG have better data and playtesting than all of us. So please take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt. But I look particularly at the 2 pilots like Boba Fett and Redline. Now, these pilots both had their points increased, and all of the cards that are in their typical builds in that first block of the meta increased as well. In the case of Boba Fett, Marauder, Han Solo, Debris Gambit, not IG-88D, but that's not sort of a key card on Boba Fett. In the case of Redline, himself, proton torpedoes, fire control systems, and in some fringe version of the Redline build, we also saw things like seismic charges alongside Trajectory Simulator, which had a massive points increase. And this does sort of raise the question, if FFG knew that they had the safety of a new points change much closer, not 6 months in advance, say 3 months in advance, would they be a little bit less heavy-handed with these ships? Indeed, from the first lot of meta results, we can see no player for Redline and Boba Fett. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. Although you might make the argument, yes, these guys clearly saw their time in the sun. It's time for them to move aside and for other ships to shine, as it were. And having said that, I am very happy to see that. A lot of like Rebel generic ships, Leia Organa, and some really cool stuff with the new factions. I'm glad that sort of Boba Fett and Redline and all the other kind of stuff aren't pushing those out. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing if they're a little bit more careful. Say, if Boba Fett, for example, was still prevalent in some scum lists, but not all of them like he was in the first part. I just feel like 6 months is a certain amount of time that makes me feel like FFG must fix something. Our points change must stick. It must be a strong enough nerf that this stops being degenerate. And when that is the case, it means it basically pushes it out of the meta altogether. And unless there's some kind of clever, elegant solution like what they did with the TIE Phantom taking off the crew, it can feel like it's a bit heavy-handed. And I feel like increasing the frequency on these points changes might be a good thing. That's just my own thoughts on this. When I look at the fact that we had to have an emergency change, I say to myself, if this was more frequent, if we were looking at a new points change in what would be now 2.5 months away, would FFG just leave it, or would they say, no, we definitely don't want anything broken at any point? I think they might take the more conservative approach and just let things slide for a bit longer if that were the case. That's just my own personal thoughts on it. In terms of what they've written in this article, the reason behind these particular points changes, I'm actually pretty happy with them. They want to talk about the fact that they don't want to cripple the First Order, because the impression I got from what they were talking about, other prevalent lists in the First Order says, okay, maybe we want to make sure like other things were powerful, like Kylo and Quickdraw, which are both seeing plenty of play. Before we nerf the Triple Upsilon, so at least the First Order have viable lists, so that's great of them to do. And focusing on negative play experience and focusing on maneuvering, I can see exactly why they've done this. Dormits with the Upsilons deploying further up the board, so they can engage in the first or second round. Hyperspace tracking data mean they can all deploy at Initiative 6. I completely understand what's going on here. It's clearly not the intended way FFG designed the Upsilon class shuttle. And ultimately, you got to appreciate that. I know it frustrates some people that wanted to buy several of these, but you do have to appreciate when something isn't really functioning correctly and it takes on this different role and it does become degenerate. You can't really rely on that staying in the meta forever. Indeed, the fact that we have points changes at all pretty much says to me that that's not a great idea. Like buying multiple big ships, I don't think it's a smart move by anyone. It's something I would absolutely greatly advise against. Anyway, guys, that's just my thoughts on these. Please in the comment section let me know what you think. I just do ask that you guys keep it civil. I know a lot of people, when we do have changes in X-Wing. In fact, just about every change in X-Wing historically has led to a lot of people agreeing with it. A lot of people disagreeing with it and getting very angry and shouting at each other. Let's keep things civil, guys. I know you guys can be cool. In the meantime, stay tuned for more X-Wing news as it develops. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Reddit. Please consider supporting the Patreon. Thank you for everyone that has supported the Patreon so far. It means the world to me. I really do appreciate it. I'll catch you guys in the next video.